You're listening to the Long Game Podcast. I'm your host, Sandra Scaiano. Do we always need to be producing? Maybe in fast fashion, but in long game thinking, there are ebbs and flows. Business is about ebb and flow because if you ebb all the time, it leads to burnout. We put so much pressure on ourselves to succeed, to make this thing we are doing work, and rightfully so when it's our livelihood. But always pushing leaves no time for release and the thoughts that come from observation. Always pushing is being focused on the task or tasks rather than listening for the response and seeing what reverberates from the push, planning, and then taking your next step. Productivity thinking is a layover from the corporate world because time is money, folks, and money is success. Well, that's one way to look at it. And let's be real, we are all in business to make a living, but we are also in business for a myriad of other reasons, ones that fulfill us, that connect us. And, what's so great about being entrepreneurs is that we get to create the work culture that we want. We get to set things up in a way that allows us to feel how we want to feel. The long game is countering productivity culture. You're listening to the Long Game Podcast with Sandra Scaiano. In a world where everyone is doing, it's easy to get lost in a sea of comparison, secret tricks, and promises of overnight success. The long game is my approach to business, the actual day in and day out philosophy that you have to show up, you have to do the work, and there's no quick fixes for long-term success. I'm a web designer, digital strategist, and energetic thinker, and I'm here to share the process and lessons I experience with my clients daily who are going through the same struggles of building a business as you are. We'll hear from successful entrepreneurs sharing their long game strategies, and I'm fun, so we're going to have a little fun along the way too. Thanks for being here. Let's get to today's episode. I think of how we work in our business like canoeing. I grew up with a lake down the street and was canoeing from a young age. My girlfriend and I would, pull out the canoe and put it on our little red wagon and wheel it down the street to the lake. And we'd spend hours paddling on the water. I was 9 years old, and which when I think back now, I think that is crazy that our parents let us paddle alone for hours. But, it was the 70s and it was such a different time. But this love of the water and canoeing stayed with me. I lived near that lake for many years and even into my adulthood, and I canoed and I kayaked there. So when you paddle, you are focused on the action. It's propelling you. But when you pause and you glide, you can sit back and you can look at the trees and listen to the birds and take in the environment. Without paddling, you stay in the same spot because there isn't a current on the lake. So combining the action with the release is what it's all about. You've got to move and you've got to pause. And the pause can be rest or just to take in the glide. So the entrepreneurial world, they can get our mind all twisted. You have to keep churning. You have to keep posting. You have to figure it out. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And that just isn't the case. But I'm hearing this a lot lately. People are feeling the pressure to create their reels or to post consistently or settle in on the, ultimate name and tagline, which is also why I loved the story Christy Krakow shared with us about changing the name of her brand on episode 97. One client recently messaged me that she didn't post this week, and her tone, it was filled with guilt as if she were letting herself down. And, sure, we talk about doing things consistently, but that doesn't mean that sometimes life doesn't get in the way. You need to take a creative break sometimes. I understand that. So take the pressure off. Your results come from what you do most of the time, not from what you do sometimes. And yes, there are times that you need to glide and look at what's going on. Listen to the responses of what you have been doing. Listen to the ideas that come to you when you stop pushing for the perfect wording. This is the long game. It's about prep, taking action, assessing, then taking the next action. You are always having some forward motion in long game thinking, but it's not always at the same rate. It's not a race. You aren't racing against anyone else or even yourself. And I know that we put these pressures on ourselves, and I get it. I've heard it. Like my clients say, I'm 50 or 60 years old and I need to get this going, or I'm burning out in my one-to-one while I get this course off the ground. This can really be the reality of small business, and also why long game thinking is so important. Because you do have great ideas and you know how to help those you work with. In long game thinking, it starts with the work that you do. It starts with your product and your content. Make this work. Make it so the work that you do gets results and the people enjoy the experience. Your product will always guide you. It will tell you what to talk about. And it takes time for us to shift. And so many of us are doing this at any given time. We're shifting into being an entrepreneur, or shifting into being a digital entrepreneur, shifting from working one-to-one to one-to-many, or shifting into our new offers. In long game thinking, your forward motion allows for the path to become clear when you don't even know what the next step is. The next step presents itself through your action. And not only through your successes, but also through things not working out the way that you wanted it to. New ideas come to you on how to bring your product, your service, or your expertise out to others. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Going through the process is ultimately where the value is for you as a creator. When you do something, whether it's launch a course or work to build your email list or show up on social media, you are putting yourself out there and collecting data. You are seeing what works for you and what your audience is responding to, as well as what they aren't. And you are hearing feedback. All of this creates the next step. None of what we imagine for ourselves happens without you taking action. And it is a long game, because putting it out and getting feedback is a process. So do you know about the Netflix show, The Queen's Gambit? So, here's the description that Netflix has of the show for those of you who don't. In a 1950s orphanage, a young girl reveals an astonishing talent for chess and begins an unlikely journey to stardom while grappling with addiction. It's a 7-part miniseries, and in 2020, it was one of the most watched Netflix programs, with approximately 62 million accounts having watched a portion or all of the show. So what's interesting about this is this film took 30 years to make. According to an Inc. magazine article, it took producer Alan Scott more than 30 years, 8 different directors, and 9 rewrites before getting the show on TV. In an interview with the Sunday Post, Scott described how he originally purchased an option in 1989 for the novel by Walter Tevis. In 1993, he acquired the exclusive rights to turn the book into a movie. So Alan Scott wouldn't name all the directors he tried to persuade him to help make the film, but it wasn't until he connected with Scott Frank, who wrote the screenplay for Minority Report, that things started to fall in place. And in 2017, Netflix agreed to produce the 7-episode series, which then became a running hit with both viewers and critics in 2020. All right, what a long game story, right? Well, let's back up to that. 1989, 1993, 2017, 2020. That took a long time. It may not take us 30 years for our hit, but what's really interesting here is that the producer didn't just acquire this and let it sit on a shelf until 2017. He actively worked with directors and writers along the way. And, he must have really thought at times, this is it, only to realize this wasn't it. It wasn't what he envisioned, but he kept moving forward. He didn't give up. And, I love this part of the concluding passage in the Inc. article. Also, just to be clear, nothing is meant to be. If it was, it would all be easy, and it's almost never easy. It only looks that way as an observer because you only see the finished product. It can easily make you doubt your own goals or dreams because they don't look like success yet. So bring some self-care into your long game plan, everybody. Allow yourself the pace and the space to create, as well as the pace and the space to breathe and observe Each one of us is on our own business journey. No two journeys look exactly alike, but allowing yourself the time to come into your own with all that you're doing in your business. You're developing and building out your own personal journey. And there are things, that we can learn from one another, ideas we can try. We can say, ooh, that looks really interesting and I want to try that for myself. And you should. Exploring the path that excites you is another part of the journey, and it's necessary. I talked about this in the What to Do in 22 episode. You've got to try new things for yourself and test them out. And when you do this, when you build your business with a long game mindset, you can take the pressure off. You can build at your own pace and not the pace of some other business owner who has an entirely different set of circumstances, different resources, and even different values from you. So I'm wrapping today up with be kind to yourself and the progress you are making. Be consistent, but do as you feel. It's okay to miss one of anything. Start your own personal course because each step, each experience, each lesson along the way builds your overnight success. All right, everyone. Have a great week. Thanks for joining me today. You can access more info in the show notes at thelonggamepodcast.net. If today's show connected with you in some way, please share it with your friends or hop on iTunes and leave me a review. Until next time, keep playing the long game. This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.